Welcome to episode 50 of the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. We are very excited to be declaring our half century. You can't see us right now because it's a podcast, but separately in 3 different parts of the world, I just imagine we're all raising our bats to the crowds around us. Varun, I always envisioned, would be the kind of guy who would slowly take off one glove at a time. DJ probably takes his helmet off, wipes the sweat off his brow, and puts both arms in the air, Chris Gayle style. But realistically, guys, as the commentator's cliche goes, our job is only half done. We got to keep going, make it to 100 episodes. But anyway, thank you to all our listeners for supporting us, getting us here to 50 episodes. We're very excited. I can safely say none of us imagined we would have 50 episodes when we started this journey just over a year ago, but we are happy to be here. Although not necessarily in the happiest of times, because we've just wrapped up a series that most of us are not really looking forward to talking about, but we're here and that's what we're going to do. So as always, I'm your host, Ashwin from Cincinnati in the US, DJ's in London, and Varun's in Singapore. So guys, thanks for joining. There's a lot happening in the world of cricket. This week, we thought we'd try to do something a little bit different as a sort of tribute to those fans who've stayed with us all through. For episode 50, our way of raising our bat to the crowd is going to be to make this sort of a listener episode. So we're going to spend most of the time just going through some of the questions, some of the insights, some of the suggestions we got from some of our listeners and followers on Twitter, and we're going to use that as a way to address most of the topics of conversation. But before we get started on some of the listener questions, I want to first just address the India-Australia series. So Varun, I'm going to come to you first. It goes without saying India was 2-0 up and then ended the series 2-3 down in the ODIs. Today, the loss in Delhi that gave Australia the series was India's last ODI before the World Cup. So just talk us through, before we're not going to get into specifics about the players or anything, but just talk us through overall how you're feeling with the series.
Yeah, so I'm feeling pretty disappointed, especially after being 2-0 up. I mean, we've had a great last 12 months. We've gone and won an ODI series in South Africa, in Australia. We've been dominant at home. And for us to kind of put up this performance, 5 ODIs before the World Cup, it's not something that I expected. It's something that I thought India would steamroll a team like Australia. So firstly, full credit to Australia. I think they showed up. They backed their players. Langer's presence in the dressing room seems to be finally working. I think they all believe in themselves. And they were talking a lot yesterday about the fact that selectors are now going to have a problem for the World Cup. And that's a good problem to have. I think with India, what happened is I personally have lost complete sight of who is a backup anymore. Was India just not able to find a playing 11? Or were they really testing players? And Kohli kind of alluded to that in the presentation ceremony where he said that there's no excuse, but they wanted to give guys a chance. I agree, I think there's no excuse. But he has kind of said that everyone's ready for the World Cup challenge. So overall, disappointing and not expected.
Yeah, fair enough. So DJ, I want to ask you a little bit of a sort of opposite question to Varun's point of view, which was, I thought an interesting insight we got from Jimit K on Twitter, who said basically to the effect of, hey, Indian fans shouldn't read too much into the loss. Yeah, we haven't lost a series at home for a while, and yeah, timing isn't great before the World Cup. Honestly, what that does is actually shows how dominant we have been in ODIs up until this point. And the series they clearly outlined was more about finding the right combination and experimenting versus actually just trying to go out and win. So what is your thought on that and kind of the role of experimenting before the big World Cup versus trying to win on a high note and get momentum before the World Cup?
It's an interesting question because, I mean, there are obviously a few questions around the team composition and the squad that's to be selected for India going forward. So one of the ways that the Indian team was using this series is to try out different players. And Kohli even alluded to that, saying we used the last 3 games to try out different players who are on the fringes and what could have stepped up to make that World Cup squad. Unfortunately, what happened was none of them actually did. And I'm sure we'll come to that later in the show. And so it kind of left us with a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth where you're 2-0 up and to lose 3-2. But I mean, I think I was talking to you guys earlier in the week and it could have well been 5-0 for that matter, because the first 2 games we were 99 for 4 in the first game. And we'd nearly lost the second game while defending a score of 250. So I think it's been a disappointing series. It's shown where the work needs to be done, which is chasing big scores and the middle order. And whether we like it or not, I think our World Cup squad will actually be decided by players' form and fitness during the IPL. And I think that's just going to be the reality of it.
So just before we get into the specifics of the squad, and I think we've spent many an hour debating the composition of the 11, the number 4 slot. So we'll come into that in a bit more detail. But DJ mentioned in his final thought something that we also heard on Twitter, and somebody named Prashant messaged us saying the IPL is not really the ideal preparation for Indian players going into the big tournament like the World Cup. So Varun, I mean, I know we are all fans of the IPL. We're going to be covering it extensively through this show in the next 6 weeks. But do you agree with that? Do you disagree? Should the board have kind of approached it a little differently in a World Cup year?
I think the board has come out and kind of said that it's been an interesting debate, right? Kohli has come out and said that the IPL performances will not affect the World Cup squad. The board has come out and said that IPL performances will, because I think from their perspective, it is all about money. The IPL has become an institution. They need to have this tournament from a sponsorship, from a revenue perspective. And so there were a bit of conflicting messages there. I personally am not a huge fan of playing an IPL just before the World Cup. I think the scary thing for me is, out of the 10 guys who we think are pretty much confirmed in the squad, what happens if one of them gets injured, right? And for me, I think so that's the negative for me, is the scheduling. The positive for me is really around the fact that we do need some practice in going after the bowling from ball one. That has been our biggest weakness for the last 2 years. And so I see that as a potential upside. But all in all, I am a little bit worried about the schedule.
Interesting. DJ, let me ask you about that, because I would have honestly expected Varun maybe to say he thinks IPL remains a critical part of it. And so do you think the same as he does?
So I think this is the first time the IPL's actually been scheduled for before a World Cup, because the IPL started in 2008. The 2011 World Cup ended in April. The 2015 World Cup ended before the IPL started. And this is the first time that it's actually being held immediately before the World Cup. And it's a little worrying if you're an Indian fan in a lot of ways, because firstly, you're worried obviously about a loss of form, you're worried about injuries, but what you're also worried about is at the back end of the IPL itself, will the big stars go easy on playing, and will they leave the game? I mean, are they going to play the entire series with the gusto they would have gone with usually? Would they put their bodies on the line? I don't think so. So I think that's going to take away a little bit from the spectacle of the IPL, right? The other thing I just wanted to quickly pick up on what Varun said was Kohli's come out and said that IPL performances won't matter, and there's been contradictions and this and that. But I mean, Kohli said that Rayudu's locked down the number 4 slot, and look where we are. But, I mean, I don't think we're anywhere closer to working out what our middle order looks like. It's not any more settled than it was a year ago when we started this podcast, right? And frankly, I'm getting a little bit tired and fatigued, and I'm sure you guys are as well, of just talking about the middle order and the issues. And I mean, I don't know how those guys live it every day, to be honest.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think the sad truth is, as much as we're all fatigued, it's the only thing we are also talking about. And so I think we are going to use that as an opportunity to get into it a little bit. So one of the things I've been thinking a lot about that I want to get your guys' perspective on is, it seems like, as far as I could remember, maybe a decade ago or maybe longer ago than that, players were on the sidelines kind of fighting for their spot, right? Like anybody who got a chance would go out there, work hard, push to make a mark and win the game for their team and win their slot, and kind of, and the same applied in multiple different sports, multiple different avenues in life. It feels like, strangely, in the world of Indian cricket, specifically with the middle order and maybe with one or two of the bowlers, we've gotten to this opposite point where a player's valuation seems to shoot up when they're on the bench. And whether it was Rahane in the South Africa Test series last year, or more recently Dhoni now, I mean, with Rishabh Pant doing pretty poorly behind the stumps, Dhoni's valuation has shot up. Same thing with nobody sticking around to chase, a low 250, 270 total. The people miss Dhoni. I mean, arguably the same thing with Rayudu. Varun, you just sent us an article that said, hey, Rayudu is the solution to all our problems. So, Varun, let me start with you. Do you think that's just become the culture, that when results aren't going our way, it suddenly becomes about the players we left out instead of the players we chose to go with?
Yeah, I genuinely think it's easier to think of it that way. When they weren't selecting Pant, I was just all over everyone I know saying, you need a six-hitter, he's the only guy. He comes into the team, now I'm thinking, is Pandya the six hitter, right? And Dhoni's batting is better. So I think it's very tough, right? I think the problem is all of us as Indian fans have an opinion. I think we follow the game way too closely for anyone's good. And yes, people sitting out just become heroes. Like I can't remember the last time Rahane played an ODI, and suddenly everyone, like all my friends, are now messaging and talking about how Rahane is probably the guy who's going to get the number 4 slot. And they might be right. That's the scary thing. But how absurd is it that Rahane is coming into the mix? Yesterday, somebody said Manish Pandey also, and that name was brought up again. Like these guys haven't played; they're not part of the mix. We're just making them heroes overnight because they're not playing. So it's very challenging, and it comes back to what DJ said. Imagine what Kohli and Shastri are going through. It's not easy, and at some point you have to say this is the best we've got.
DJ, we got a comment on Twitter that articulated a similar point of view a little bit differently, which basically said, hey, there seems to be an increasingly boorish attitude where Indian fans are basically making scapegoats out of anybody who doesn't perform at 101%, and suddenly from being a player in the national side gets treated and talked about like they're absolutely worthless. So I thought that was pretty insightful coming from Achal. He also mentioned specifically the incident of where Pant missed a stumping, and then the crowd in Mohali basically started chanting Dhoni, Dhoni in unison. I mean, which has got to be tough for a 21-year-old, let alone for anybody. So what is your reaction to that?
So look, I'm a big Dhoni fan, and I think we've felt his absence in the last 2 games. We felt his absence in the 4th game with the stumpings that Pant missed. And we felt his absence today when we couldn't chase down what was a middling 270 odd total. What that doesn't take into account is that Rishabh Pant is an excellent young player. He's done very well in his short international career. He's full of beans. He's a fun character. He looks like he's enjoying cricket, and that kind of behavior from our own crowd, I think that was completely unacceptable. We've seen in Cricket Fever, right, how much it affects young players. We saw how Ishan Kishan is affected by poor performances and not doing well, and how it affects his confidence and his personality and his day-to-day life. I mean, he's always thinking about what he could have done better. And I'm sure Rishabh Pant is absolutely the same. They've got about a year between them, right? And so that kind of behavior is not great to see from Indian fans. And Indian fans are, and we are guilty of it too. We're passionate, we're emotional, we are tied. Our lives revolve around this Indian cricket team because we follow them and we enjoy them and we want them to do well, and we almost worship them in a way because they've been elevated to these demigods who can do anything, right? And when they don't do that and when they fail, we are so quick to criticize. And I think after we lost the last World Cup, we wrote an article on our blog which was no one's got to lean on winning and no one's got to lean on success. So I think as Indian fans, we need to probably try and be a little more balanced sometimes, because when we do well, we go completely overboard and lose our minds and take out processions and do all sorts of stuff. And when we lose, we burn players' houses. So there needs to be a balance, right? And we can't generalize, but maybe it's just a few bad apples, which just mob mentality, but it's not good for poor Rishabh.
Very, very insightful comments. I think it's disappointing for the players. You shared a lot of insightful things, but for some reason, the only thing that stuck with me is your choice of an expression full of beans. And I have no idea what that means. Last week, you unleashed hell for leather on us. I'm just assuming it means full of energy and high-spirited. But I feel like now you're going to teach us one new British expression every week.
Okay, I'll try. Along with my scheduling duties, which I've done for 50 episodes straight. Man, I'm amazed. That's the other thing I'm amazed about, that we've managed to get this podcast 50 episodes. I mean, 50 times we managed to meet and do it. Amazing.
The job is only half done. Varun, have you heard full of beans, or is it just me who's being ignorant? To me, full of beans kind of signals somebody who's at risk of having gas.
Too much rajma.
Yeah, I was thinking of that beans are good for the heart. The more you eat, the more the heart.
There it is. All right. Thanks for that. Good sidebar, guys.
Keeping it classy as always.
So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the bowlers and the lower order and the top order. But first, I want to start in between. Varun, I just have a 2-word phrase I want you to react to. Ready?
Yep.
Kedar Jadhav.
The best player India has ever seen.
Is that it? That's all you have?
You can't just double down on your hate, Varun. You can't double down on it. Acknowledge that he's done better than your player, firstly. Pant is your player. He's done better than your player. And he's done better than a lot of other people in the team. And he's done better than Shankar, I think, also.
Yeah, I tried pulling up stats yesterday. In fact, Junior sent me stats on Kedar's runs versus teams versus India versus overseas. It's not a pretty picture, but having said that, I think he does deserve to play. He has done well, and so there's no doubt about that. What I just can't figure out is now you're bowling him less and less. So where does that leave him? Is he good enough to play as a standalone batsman? Because I think that was my whole issue. And to be fair, he's done fine. He's done better than the rest of the middle order. So, yep, he's in that playing 11. He's on that plane to the World Cup. No debate there. But I'm not sure about his bowling.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly summarize, in this 5 ODI series that just happened, he made 172 runs at an average of 43, which was better than Rohit Sharma, better than Dhoni, better than Pant, better than Shankar, better than Jadeja, better than Rayudu, who played 3 of the games. So I we have to give credit where it's due, but I also just enjoy making fun of you for it, since this morning, like you said, you were about to pull stats and double down on the hate for Jadhav, and then although it ended up in a losing cause, he's the only batsman with Bhuvi who showed some fight in the 5th ODI. So have to give credit where it's due.
And he's got some dance moves. I sent you that video, Varun.
Yeah, he has. So I think that has changed my perception a little
I
bit.
think so. I think, what was the song that he was dancing to?
He's dancing to Over Jane Jana and Chura Ke Dil.
Yeah, so I mean, ठीक है यार. You can't hate a guy who dances to Chura Ke Dil Mera with the steps and the head move also.
Yeah, not at all.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break on that happy note. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about the batting and the bowling. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back. DJ, let me jump straight in and ask you a little bit about the bowling composition. So as we think about who's in the mix going into the World Cup, it sounds like there doesn't seem to be unanimity around the 3 quick bowlers. You have Bhuvi, Bumrah, and Shami. For a while, it was looking like Bumrah and Shami are the leading 2. Then Bhuvi has shown that, hey, not just did he have a great spell today with 3 wickets, but he also showed that he can show some fight with the bat. On the flip side, we've been talking about Kuldeep and Chahal, the spin twins doing really well, but then Jadeja, at least on paper, adds some batting value, although he hasn't shown any of that. So what's going on with the bowling? Where do you think it'll net out for the World Cup?
I think it's KulCha. KulCha are going to play. Jadeja will... I'm going to say that he will not make the squad unless it's for his fielding, because I don't think he adds enough with the bat, and we've seen it in this series. He got ducked today, he got 20 odd in one game, but he just hasn't performed enough with the bat. Today was his big chance, and I think he may have missed the plane to the World Cup today. He's a brilliant fielder, so I think Varun has said previously that we'd have him in the side just for his fielding, and that's the only reason I see him actually flying there. I don't see him playing any games. That said, Chahal didn't play today, and Chahal was expensive in the 4th game that he played. But I mean, it's only to be expected, right? He hasn't played all the games. He was rested for the first 3 games. But I think our premier spinners, the ones that have won us series in South Africa and in Australia, are Kuldeep and Chahal.
So who are your 5 bowlers? You have Kuldeep and Chahal. What are you thinking about the quicks versus the all-rounder mix?
I think we're going to play 2 quicks full time. It's going to be Bhuvi, who provides a little bit of batting, and Bumrah. And hopefully they'll hone their death bowling skills in the IPL by that time. And it's going to be Pandya, who I'm sure we'll discuss in great detail later in this show.
Yeah, let us come back a little bit to Pandya. Varun, let me ask you, let's pivot a little bit to talk about the batting. So we ran an interesting Twitter poll this week, and we asked who should bat at number 4 for India in the World Cup. I think we did this after the 3rd ODI, so just keep that in context. We got 48% of votes for MS Dhoni. We got 12% of votes for Kohli, so it feels like the majority think Kohli should stick to his number 3. 22% for Rahul, and then 18% for Rayudu. We got a couple other interesting stats. We had at Cricket Guru talking about Rayudu and how he should have been the right fit. We had Prashant talking about how it was unfair that Rahul keeps getting dropped after getting 1 game and not necessarily doing badly. We had Kapil MSD4 suggest that maybe Kedar Jadhav can walk in at bat at number 4, which I know how you're going to feel about. But he is right that he walked in at number 4 against England at Pune and made 120 off 76. We had, like you mentioned, somebody named Prakhar suggesting Rahane. And then we had a few interesting folks suggest actually Vijay Shankar to come in at number 4, which hasn't really been tested. But Tushar, Nikhil, Vignesh, Sumedh, they all mentioned Vijay Shankar. So what's your thought on that number 4 slot, which seems to be that one slot that's not confirmed?
Yeah, so I have two things. My first preference is to have Dhoni at 4, and this is what I've been saying for a while. I think Dhoni's not played the last 3 ODIs, and for me personally, it's just made me believe more and more that he has to bat at 4, anchor the inning, and guide the guys around. I mean, his experience brings so much value to the team. When he's not keeping, even Kuldeep Yadav looks lost and gets hit for 75 runs. When he's in the middle, he's guiding Kedar to kind of win the match for India. And I think the first ODI, if I'm not mistaken, you need him to be able to guide these guys. My strong opinion is Dhoni has to bat at 4, and I think somebody's going to have a chat, probably Kohli, Dhoni, and Shastri, and say that look, we have to start the World Cup this way. There are too many other issues, and so that's my personal belief. My second is I'm going to stick to what I said probably 6 months ago, which is Kohli at 4. And I just feel like having Kohli in the last 15-20 overs of the innings gives me personally a lot of comfort. So, but I don't think Kohli's going to do that, which is why for me it's very clear Dhoni has to bat it.
And then, so it sounds like there's still one slot missing, right? If you think about Shikhar, Rohit, Kohli, Dhoni, Jadhav making up your top 5 of your top 6. So if Dhoni does come to 4, who slots into 5 for you?
So I would say Shankar as of now. I would say Shankar.
Got it. Very interesting. I think there's a lot to say on that. DJ, just quickly on the number 4 slot. Do you agree that Dhoni at 4? Do you think Kohli at 4? Or do you think Shankar / maybe Pant or Rayudu? Or who else slots in there?
I've got a slightly different take to Varun on this, and I think I've said it before. I don't think Dhoni can be fixed at number 4. I think he's got a bit of a floating role when we chase and when we bat first as well. If we've done well, then I don't think he can come in at 4 because he kind of stalls the innings, right? So I'm going to go with whoever out of Pant, Shankar, DK, and Rahul have the best IPL. We'll get that slot.
So Rayudu's 100% out for you?
No, Rayudu's the other 5th one. Sorry. So those are the 5 people vying for that one slot, and I think it's going to be whoever is fit after the IPL and whoever is in form after the IPL, because no one has locked that slot down. And I mean, we've got to be flexible with our batting order, right? And I think, Varun, you mentioned this previously when we've spoken about this. When we won the World Cup, we had a flexible batting order, and we even saw that in the final when Dhoni just promoted himself and just moved up, and it was fluid, and people weren't fixed in places where they needed to bat. And that's the kind of fluidity that we need, and the responsiveness to situations that we are going to need. So to my mind, whoever's in good form, I mean, Rahul can do the job, Karthik can do the job. I'm not so sure about Shankar. I think he's too new. Rayudu can do the job because we've seen him do it before in the IPL. He's quite an experienced player. And I'm not sure Pant can do the job because he's one too many wicket keepers and he's too young. And I don't think India is going to take the risk on him. So realistically, it comes down to those 3 players for me.
Interesting. I think it's going to be a fascinating IPL season. You know, I don't know if any of us would necessarily have said, hey, performance in a domestic T20 league could dictate a slot, especially as critical at number 4 for the World Cup. But it seems like that's what we're coming down to. I guess the positive is that 10 of the slots seem pretty certain, but 5 contenders, even if it's really only 3 for one slot, is very, very interesting. And it's going to be an interesting time to see who even makes the final 15. I mean, we could end up in a place where somebody like a Jadeja doesn't even make the plane to England. So we'll have to see how that goes. Varun, I want to ask you one more thing. So you talked about how Dhoni is critical to the squad. DJ mentioned he thinks Pandya is critical to the squad. In that number 7 slot, gives you a bowling option. You said he may be our big 6 hitter, etc. So we got a couple of interesting insights or questions on Twitter. The first came from Peter Gate, where it said, do we know what's going on with Pandya's injury? Did you guys see the clip of him dancing with Karan Johar at the Ambani wedding? We also had Arindam Saha ask us what's going on. He was in the Mumbai Indians nets the other day. So does that mean IPL is more important than India, even in a year as important as this one? So what's going on with Pandya?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the good news is he's made up with Karan Johar, and that all of us saw that they were dancing together. But
yeah, because that's what we were all worried about, right? That they wouldn't be on talking terms.
But yeah, it's. I don't know. I can't figure it out. I read some places that Pandya's got serious fitness issues. I read in other places, or I see on Instagram that he's bowling. In fact, I'm watching a video of him bowl in the nets and hit the middle stump as we speak right now. So I'm not sure. I think India has made it very clear that he is crucial to the team selection. I just hope that Mumbai Indians doesn't do an Evan Lewis type situation for all of those who have seen it, where they basically forced Evan Lewis to play, take an injection, and said sometimes you got to play with the pain. And I think that was horrible. Like just watching that. But I hope they don't do that with Pandya. Yeah, and I think Pandya is crucial to the team. He'll definitely be taken to England. But I think what Bhuvi has done yesterday is kind of opened up the question a little bit that can Bhuvi actually play as number 7 with Shami and Bumrah? And again, I don't want to open a new can of worms here, but it's just going to be a very interesting discussion. Like I personally feel that 10 out of 15 of the squad are secure. And I think there's 7 guys fighting for the last 5 spots. And I think it's going to be very interesting.
DJ Varun mentioned Bhuvi at 7. We got a remark from Neha on Twitter that said Bhuvi the all-rounder. Is Bhuvi an all-rounder in your eyes?
I think he's a bowler who can bat. He isn't consistent enough yet. He's a decent batsman. He isn't consistent enough yet to get the label of the next Hardik Pandya or Hardik Pandya 3.0, since you've already called Vijay Shankar Hardik Pandya 2.0.
Would that make him Vijay Shankar 2.0 then?
I don't know, or it could be Hardik Pandya 3.0 or Ben Stokes 4.0. I don't know. Anyway, coming back to the question, I think Bhuvi batting at 7 is too high. We'll have a very, very long tail, and we can't afford that, as we've seen of late. I mean, even today we were actually in a better position than Australia were at one stage. We only had 6 wickets down, and we were 229, and we saw how quickly all that unfolded. Because once you kind of get to Shami's pretty clueless with the bat, although he does have a Test 50. He just knows one way how to play, and he just keeps smashing it. Pandya is one of those players, as we were talking earlier in the show, whose value actually goes up the more he sits out. So he's had a lot of injury issues. He had his back issue in the Asia Cup, and then he got suspended, and then he's had another injury after that. So realistically, the last thing I remember him doing is taking that fantastic catch in New Zealand and smashing 45 of 22, which is actually just the last thing that I remember him doing. So for me, he walks into this team, right? Although Vijay Shankar's been doing pretty well, who would be his natural replacement in my mind. Also, Pandya dancing at the Ambani wedding, I'm just like, this guy just needs to stay out of the limelight for a little while, but he just can't somehow manage to do it. But speaking of the Ambanis, by the way, guys, what about so you both finished Cricket Fever, right?
We have, I have.
Okay, so no spoilers for our listeners here, because obviously everybody knows Mumbai was knocked out of the playoffs. But what did you guys think of the speeches right at the end of that show? Ashwin?
I'm trying to remember what you're talking about, specifically the Ambanis making the speeches.
The
right?
Ambani speeches.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit odd. I mean, first off, I thought it was really odd that, what's the female owner's name? Nita or Tina? Which one is she?
Nita.
Nita, sorry.
Tina!
Okay. I thought it was odd. I thought it was odd that Nita didn't show up during most of the losses, just showed up during the wins to celebrate, which was strange. And then when she did show up, it was just bizarre. The whole thing about the owner's role in the IPL is bizarre, and I'd be curious to see if the GMR founders or Shahrukh and Juhi for KKR or any of these guys interact the same way. But it was very bizarre. I don't have anything more to say than that.
Yeah, doesn't it feel like it's some school gym where these kids have been pulled up for doing something bad, Varun?
It just irritated me so much, DJ. I can't explain to you. It just like standing there with the plastic face. I'm so disappointed in you. And reflect and come back. Like what? And I wish you the best in your personal endeavor.
For the next 10 months, she said.
It was just horrible. It was just horrible. I don't know how else to describe it.
But it's what I said, right? Like, it's like there was that Akash Ambani reference to an uncapped player also. So it really made me think, do these guys play fantasy cricket also, apart from owning a actual IPL cricket team, which is the rich person's version of fantasy cricket. It really made me think, why does this guy know this uncapped terminology, man? There's
Their whole life is fantasy cricket, man. Real reality is fantasy cricket for them.
Imagine
seriously.
your dad buys your fantasy cricket team. Like, what else do you want in life?
Seriously, man. Insane.
Aside from the fact that in the house they had a whole like indoor track, and that the house was a little bit
They
obscene.
had a roller coaster in the house.
What?
It was too weird.
Did you see that?
It was so weird.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Or a VR, it was like a virtual reality roller coaster. I don't know what was going on.
It ultimately basically was hard to tell whether it was supposed to be a documentary that gave us an in-depth look into the Mumbai Indians or a promotion for the Ambani house.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he promoted them too well. Anyway, go on. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, totally fine. I think we wrapped up the India side. I don't think any of us has any answers, but I think that's the most accurate reflection of what's going on with Team India right now. I want to ask you guys really quickly, Varun, let's start with you, Team Australia. So about 2 months ago, which is not even that long ago, I think we would have all sat here and said, hey, top two favorites for the World Cup, India and England. New Zealand are kind of close third. South Africa, haven't been doing great, but well enough, essentially. Now we sit here with West Indies having beaten England. We sit here with Australia having beaten India in India without Smith and Warner coming back. And South Africa is playing a 5-match ODI series against Sri Lanka, and they're 4-0 up already with Quinton de Kock seemingly in the form of his life. Do we think the World Cup is wide open again? And do we think Australia is a serious contender for the World Cup?
Yeah, I do. I can't remember if I said it on the show, but I've been saying it offline to a lot of friends that I think Australia is going to win the World Cup, and they've all been very upset, saying that their whole faith in life will be lost if that comes true, because they've just been winning World Cup after World Cup. Yesterday, Cummins in the press ceremony said, I don't know how, but somehow we seem to peak just before the World Cup, and I think that's true. I think if Stark, Warner, and Smith, or even 2 out of these 3 are back, I think Australia is going to the final.
Fascinating. DJ, we got a question from J Cricket Dude about, hey, how do you think about Turner versus Maxwell for the World Cup now that Turner showed up against India? Should Australia deploy a pace quartet, or do we think about Zampa and Lyon, Zampa did well, Lyon was pretty average in the ODIs. How do you think about that, and what is Australia going to do for the World Cup?
So first up, I'm going to apologize in advance, because I think I said Australia have zero chance of winning the World Cup a couple of episodes ago, and I'm going to reiterate that Australia have zero chance. I'm just doubling down on my prediction. I really hope it doesn't come true, because it's going to be horrible. Anyway, Maxwell and Turner. I think Maxwell played really well in the T20s. He played really well in the first few ODIs. I don't see Turner replacing him. Turner's probably less established, less experienced. He did really well in the fourth game. Amazing innings of 84 or 43 balls, just smashing it. But I mean, if we stumped him and caught him, he would have been out, right? I don't see Maxwell being left out for him. What I do see is one of the Marshes being left out for him, which is what happened today, right? So he could take one of the other spots in the team. Marcus Stoinis is the other one that he would threaten as a power hitter. Stoinis really couldn't get going today, and that's where I see Turner coming in for him. Zampa and Lyon, I think given it's England, I think both of them will go to the World Cup, and both of them might play, but it really depends on what the conditions are going to be. If there's going to be belters, then I think Zampa will play ahead of Lyon, and Australia will deploy the quicks to try and take advantage, as they have done traditionally in England, and played their quicks over here. But I think Zampa is there. Zampa's bowled brilliantly, by the way. This series, he's got Kohli a number of times, actually. I think maybe 3 times.
Yeah, I think his over in the 5th ODI was ultimately the difference, right? Where he just dismissed Rohit and Jadeja together.
Yeah, did he win the Pepsi Swag Award?
I can't keep up with the awards, man. Maybe he won FBB Stylish Player of the Match.
No, but Pepsi Swag is a great award, man. Come on.
Did you notice that in the Cricket Fever documentary, Hardik and Krunal had the FBB Stylish Player of the Match awards in their room in the house in Baroda? And they were really proud that each had won 3. So neither is more stylish nor less stylish than the other.
So what do you win it for? One shot or like best hairstyle?
I think best Sherwani.
Best Sherwani, that's Akash Chopra, dude. He's going to win that.
Permanent fixture. All right, a couple of closing things that happened this week in the world of cricket. I just want to touch upon. As I mentioned, Sri Lanka is touring South Africa. Not going so well. I think they've played 4 ODIs so far, and after are down 0-4. So amazing story winning the Test series, but have quickly bounced back, and South Africa quickly bounced back and are 4-0 up in a 5 ODI series. They go on to play 320s after that, the last of which wraps up right around when the IPL starts. Bangladesh is touring New Zealand. Also not going great for the Bangladeshis after a clean sweep in the 3 ODIs. New Zealand have won the first 2 tests, both by an innings. Pretty amazingly, one of which had 2 days rained out, and they still, thanks to some incredible batting and leadership due to Kane Williamson, they won both tests by an innings. So pretty exciting. The last thing I wanted to touch upon in the world of cricket was the heartbreaking India-England women's series that wrapped up. So after a good win in the ODIs, 2-1, England managed to sweep the 3 T20s. But to me, what was most heartbreaking, I don't know if you guys saw this, in the final ODI where India was just playing for pride essentially. It was at the 19th over. They were only 4 down, needed 3 runs to win off the last over, and then Kate Cross came in, bowled 3 dot balls and picked up 2 wickets. And gave, I think, 1 run on the last ball of the match. So 1 run and 2 wickets in the 20th over, and England won the thrilling match by 1 run. So disappointing for India. I think good signs in general for the Indian women's team, but not great to see that result.
Are we becoming the chokers of women's cricket? I hate to ask it, but I think we need to ask.
I hope not. I want to say it's too early. It's too early for us to make that call. I think it's just the lack of big game experience, and I think it's great to see tours like this where they're getting the big game experience. So hopefully not, or maybe I'm just being wishful and trying to avoid what you're saying coming true.
Yeah, because there have been a number of games, the World Cup final, the World T20 semi-final. We lost a few close games in the T20 series against England. Yeah, let's hope we come out of this funk pretty quickly, actually, for Indian women.
All right, guys. So as we wrap this up, I want to just take one more final question to each of you guys. Varun, 10 days out from the IPL, you can say it's coming up to toss time. Who's going to win this year's IPL, Varun?
That's a tough one, man. I think Sunrisers.
DJ?
I don't want to say it.
Go for it, man. You're on the record.
It's going to be Delhi Capitals. Delhi Capitals is going to win it in 2019. 11 years after it started.
Or it's the first year of Delhi Capitals.
Yeah, for the reign for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
See, I'm sure we'll come to this later, but the problem is Delhi Capitals keeps getting all these awesome young players who go elsewhere, man. Like, we'll come to this on our IPL preview.
Yeah, and we've been talking about that for a while now, including Kedar Jadhav, who Varun will be happy to know is doing amazingly well for his national side.
Pat Cummins, who will forever be known as the Cum Dog. Because I read a Reddit thread about Pat Cummins, and they called him that there. I can't get it out of my head since. It's horrible.
Anyway, guys, we're going to wrap this up. I'm going to echo DJ's prediction that the Delhi Capitals are going to win, because if I don't believe that, then what's the point, right?
Do we have a new theme song also?
I don't know. I don't know if it's out yet. It feels like everybody's been so focused on Australia. So these next 10 days are going to be the real build-up to the IPL. We'll see lots about the teams. I'm sure warm-ups, lots of videos, lots of good insight coming from each of the teams. Guys, we're going to kick off a detailed preview of the IPL, and we'll do lots of in-depth coverage in the IPL starting next week. We will hope to get one fan that we know from each of the 8 teams. So stay tuned on that. We'll have the next 8 episodes. Basically, we'll have fans come on, talk to us about their team, and then obviously cover what's going on during the season as well, which, as we had just predicted, is going to be Delhi having a breakthrough season. So watch for that. The last thing we wanted to share is, for those of you who've been following our website or blog, we've been pretty actively involved in fantasy leagues. We give tips and tricks, and we all obviously play pretty actively ourselves. So this year, as we mentioned on Twitter, we are going to have an Edges and Sledges listener fantasy league. So stay in touch. If you don't follow us on Twitter yet, what are you waiting for? Follow us at One Tip One Hand. We'll share details on there, but we'll be creating a fantasy league for followers and listeners of the podcast and our blog. So definitely join us there. It would be fantastic to compete against you guys, and it's a great way to stay in touch with the rest of the IPL. So that wraps up episode 50. Again, thank you very much for accompanying us to our half century. We hope to keep going. If you don't already, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at One Tip One Hand. If you don't have any of those, send us an email, contact@onetiponehand.com. And we will be back next week to do more formal IPL previews before 8 exciting weeks of IPL coverage. So thank you very much, guys. Gents, thanks for joining me today.